Coming up on Maine Challenge, State Senator Dana Dow of Waldoboro. Hello and welcome to Maine Challenge. Our guest this week is State Senator Dana Dow of Waldoboro. In the state Senate, Senator Dow represents pretty much all of Lincoln County with a little bit of shading around the edges. And feel free, maybe Senator Dow, you could tell us your towns, list your towns.
Well, it's all Lincoln County except the town of Dresden, plus Windsor in Kennebec and Washington and Knox.
Love that reallocation of population to Senate districts over every 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today. To get started, what I thought we might do is give you your opportunity for your elevator speech to tell us why voters in Lincoln County should vote for Republicans and for you.
Well, I'm going to talk about just me. And so, and even though I am a Republican, that's true. I'm hoping to continue to improve the business climate of the state of Maine because it's businesses that most people work for. I've been very concerned over the decades that we've become the oldest state in the nation. We've lost over 25% of our K-12 school population since 1970. Our death rate is higher than our birth rate. All of these are well-known, or maybe they're not well-known statistics, but they are true. And we have to ask ourselves a reason why that has happened over the decades. And my conclusion has been that too many businesses have not expanded, not moved into the state or moved out of the state. Excuse me, that's from adjusting the phone too much. So that we need to do things that will keep people in the state of Maine. We've been talking about the brain drain for many, many years, but we haven't done anything about it. And some of the things that affect that are the tax rates and over-regulations that we seem to have in this state compared to some of the other nearby states, that is.
Well, you are the what we call the floor leader, the minority leader in the state Senate for the Republicans. Is that correct?
I am.
And so that sort of puts you in the position of representing the Republican Party. And I've heard a number of people who are confused and somewhat disoriented by the lack of a platform at the convention last week. And I think voters want to know, at least many that I've talked to, want to know where candidates stand in terms of the big issues. And I'd like to hear from you on that as to where you are on some of the big issues. And I'll name them if you like, or I'll let you just talk about the ones that come to mind.
Well, of course, as I've already stated, business is a big one. Increasing the business opportunities for Maine. And I'm not talking about businesses because I own Dow Furniture, but I'm not Dow Furniture. The 18 people that work for me are Dow Furniture. Right. So if anything I can do to make the business more stable, make it more productive, make it better, it benefits them.
Sure.
And how does it benefit them? It gives them pay raises, gives them health benefits, just gives and other benefits, and just gives them stability. And stability is the key to businesses. So when I talk about business, I'm really talking about workers in the state of Maine. And I've been very discouraged at times at the things that have happened in Maine over the decades that have anti-business and have caused people to leave the state. And I'm tired of listening to people who tell me that their children or their grandchildren have moved out of state, and some of them come back after they've made their money, come back and retire, or they come back and set up some businesses after a while. But it'd be nice to keep a lot of people here. This is a great state, and those are always my main concerns. Those are the long range goals.
My son, who was born in Maine and went through schools here in Thomaston, and is now an employee of the United States Post Office. And he's feeling not very secure about his job for the first time. And it's a mystery to him and his friends as to why the Trump administration wants to destroy the post office. And that's how it feels to him as an employee. And it's how it feels to some customers. Can you help Mr. Trump out a little bit and explain who benefits from destroying sorting machines and not repairing trucks and what's going on?
Well, from a business point of view, all of that wouldn't make any sense. The post office, from what I understand, is a kind of a quasi-government organization, and their funding comes from their own sources, which is, of course, delivering the mail. So that's why we have a periodic increase in postage.
Right.
Every once in a while, or seldomly, I should say, the federal government gets involved into giving them money. So this may be one of those time periods when we have to step in and give a dose of money to help through a problem that seems to be going on right now. But that's what I would look at. But of course, that's a federal problem. That isn't something I deal with.
It's more than a federal problem. It's a problem to every state, including ours. Yeah, and so we have to try to come up with some solutions for all the problems around. Are you with the president about destroying Social Security?
No, I haven't. I'm not even aware of any talk about the president destroying Social Security. I usually hear just the opposite, that we want to keep Social Security stable. And in order to do that,
his proposal is to end the payroll tax. And of course, we all like hearing about taxes getting cut, but that is basically, as I understand it, if he succeeds in cutting the payroll tax, the post office is basically, I'm sorry, Social Security is defunded in 2023. Now, do you have relatives, friends who are on Social Security and depend on it to pay their bills?
Yeah, I think the one that is talking to you is drawing Social Security. So,
as am I.
Yeah, no, I have not worried about the collapse of Social Security. It's a vital institution that will be maintained in one form or another. I know we talk a lot about, some Republicans in this state talk about doing away with the income tax, but I can't see that happening. I mean, just because New Hampshire doesn't have one, we can make adjustments to ours to try to be competitive with the other states without doing away with it. I don't see that as probably a legitimate proposal to do away with the payroll tax.
Tell us about, let's get back to Lincoln County then, and your Senate district. What are some of the critical issues to people beyond the business climate? What are some of the critical issues for people living in your Senate district where the state legislature can help?
Well, we don't have a massive industry in this mid-coast area. And likewise, we don't have a community college. The closest thing we have to a community college is the Region 8, the new Region 8 in Rockland. And I'm very impressed with that, and I support it more than most people do, because that is the one institution we have in this area that can train adults at night. They have a lot of night classes. It isn't just a day school. And because being a former school teacher, education is very important to me. And I see that as breaking a lot of roadblocks. And if there's any programs I like to see worked on, it has to do with helping adults in their education process to better themselves so that they can get better jobs and get better pay and have a more substantial life.
Thank you. When I was in the legislature, and I think you were too, when Governor LePage, 2011 basically, did a fairly broad and wide tax cut, especially on corporate taxes. Looking back on that, almost 10 years later, do you think that helped Maine's economy? And are we in a better place now as a result of those cuts?
Yeah, I don't think the corporate tax was cut much. We still have one of the highest corporate taxes in the nation. Yes, I do think it helps some, but I just want to remind people at 7.15% at the top end, we're still over 2 points higher than Massachusetts. We used to joke and laugh at Massachusetts and call them Taxachusetts. Well, they got their act together, cut their rate to 5.1 at one point, and they put a provision in that if they took in more money than they expected, that their tax rate would go down a little bit. So they've reduced it to 5.05 income taxes. That's right. And there's one thing that people don't know about the income tax in this state. The low end, that is the income tax that we charge the poor people, that's what I refer to, is 5.8%. The low rate happens to be the highest in the nation. We charge the lower income people in this state more income tax than any state in the country. And our low rate is higher than 17 states' top rates. Like I said, Massachusetts, 5.05, Pennsylvania, 3.07. Those are both flat taxes. The 17 states that have lower top rate taxes than our low rate, plus the 9 that have no income tax at all. So there's 26 states that have a lower tax than our low end. And I think we need some tax reform there. I just don't go for the definition that we're going to tax the rich, because from what I've seen, the definition for the rich is anybody that has a job in this state and they can be taxed. So I don't go with that. And I think we need to make some adjustments.
Has the legislature in this current term or the previous term when you were also there, has the legislature done anything about that? Has there been legislation that adjusts that and increases the fairness of it?
There's been talk about it, but the will to do it has not been there in the vast majority of the legislature. Other problems have been dealt with, but I look at this as a long-term problem. And when I look at the population of the state of Maine being stagnant, and then because I'm very well traveled in this state, and I've been around this state all over and spent much time in different localities. And I take northern Maine, for instance, who has lost 40% of that population since 1970. And that's just about time the income tax started to kick in. And I believe that every time we ratcheted up the income tax, it took some businesses in northern Maine that were on a knife edge already, because the markets are so far away in Boston that their expenses were more, that it caused them harm. So I would like to continue to pursue some tax reform, and it's for working people. I want to get the tax back so that businesses will expand. Businesses will come here and locate. And in this state, we don't have a great reputation for business climate. New Hampshire, in some publications, is rated number 2. We're rated number 48 in some publications. Sometimes we get put on the short list for businesses looking to relocate, but most of the time we don't make the short list. We make just a long list and not the short list.
One thing that I've been concerned about for a long time are energy costs. And I'm wondering where you are on alternative energies like solar and wind, and do you support, let's start with that. Solar and wind, are you a supporter or not?
Well, I was the sponsor of the major solar bill this year that passed. And that is a bill that has had big ramifications in this state. I actually had several companies, about a dozen of them, come and meet me in the Senate chamber. They were from Massachusetts, they were from New Hampshire and Maine, to tell me how grateful they were for this solar bill, which allowed medium-sized projects. By medium-sized, I mean a whole school system to be able to set up a solar system, or a town to do it. And it erased a lot of the roadblocks that were in place. And for instance, Maine Health, they called me personally a few weeks ago to tell me that when they get their projects done, that they're going to save $1 million a year. So solar to me is just another business part that I'm always in favor of investing in businesses in the state of Maine, and anything that will improve businesses. My reputation in conservation in the state, at least in the state house, is fairly well known. 2 years ago on the conservation survey that was given out, it's a scorecard. I was the only Republican. I'm going to say that again. I was the only Republican in the House and the Senate that received a perfect score on the scorecard for that year. I've always maintained.
This is from the Maine conservation voters?
Yes. And I've always maintained quite a high score throughout. And at one time I looked to see where I compared, and one of the senators that was ahead of me, Republican senators, was one who had been an independent and previously been a Democrat. He was slightly, had a couple points on me, and Senate President Kevin Ray from Washington County. But I've always maintained that. I think it goes back to my roots with Teddy Roosevelt and the park conservation and all of that. I really think it starts there, but I've always been very concerned with conservation. So the solar projects have been very important, and there are several towns. Matter of fact, there have been a couple of articles in the Portland Press Herald lately talking about solar projects. Now, they don't ever mention my name, of course, but a lot of the stuff that's being done was because of the bill that I was asked to sponsor. And why was I asked to sponsor that bill? Because why not a Democrat? Well, I'm a Republican. I'm supposed to be the one against those things. I'm not. And they knew as a leader that they thought I could get the bill through, and I was glad to do that. And I supported and spoke on the bill whenever I needed to help get that solar bill through.
Well, good for you. I appreciate that. How do you stand on the so-called corridor, the mostly underground DC line to deliver Canadian hydropower to Massachusetts that cuts right through the state of Maine? Are you in support of that project?
I do support it because it'll help substantially lower carbon dioxide emissions. In an energy symposium I attended many years ago when I was in the Senate, the talk was that if New England was going to grow, they had to increase their power supply 15% or more. And this is one of the sources that will do it. I know for a fact that Canada has built all of these power sources, dams. They'd already done it. It was like watching the movie about build it and they will come. Well, they already have these things in place and they're using about 40% of this clean power. And if we can get it into New England, it'll help. Not only does it just go to Massachusetts, but we're all part of the New England power grid, and it'll come back up here too, and it'll help with our costs of energy also. I'm convinced of that.
Do you know why Vermont and New Hampshire rejected the project?
I think the line that it would have to cut through were much too long. We're talking about 58 miles for us. Somebody told me it's like the equivalent of creating 2 new dairy farms. I don't know. That's just a funny way of saying it. But anyway, ours is like a 58-mile corridor to get to the existing places. Somebody told me a curious fact that it's 150 feet wide, only needs to be 75 feet to get the power out of Canada. The other 75 feet has to do with the potential for lines being put up from windmills, because the power coming out of Canada is DC and the windmills produce AC, and you can mix the two, but you have to do it either at many small substations, which are uneconomical, or you do it in one big location in Lewiston.
Huh. I hadn't heard that one.
No.
What did you have any bills that are sort of stuck in the limbo of not being able to get out of committee and be disposed of before the next legislature?
Yeah, I don't have any personally. I've looked a whole bunch of them. There are a half a dozen business bills that if they were all instituted and you piled one on top of the other, it would be quite devastating for businesses. There are just too many regulations and too many different things that have to be done in tax here and tax there. And that's not conducive to this business climate. And I'm not going to vote anyway for things that don't improve the business climate, because I'm tired of I don't want my own grandchildren to leave the state either. So we need to do everything we can to improve the business climate in the state of Maine and make it possible for businesses who want to come here. And that's what I heard from all these solar company businesses about the solar bill that I passed. That was a big help to them and to the whole process. And there's now dozens of applications out there for solar projects, so much so that Central Maine Power had to send a notice to the PUC about reaching a 10% threshold for the way that type of electricity is paid, to have that reviewed. So it's coming to the forefront, and I'm glad to have helped along the way. There's projects here in Waldoboro that'll take place because of it.
Well, we're running out of time. Unfortunately, there's lots more to cover that there always seems to be. But one thing I did want to ask you about is coming back for a special session. Were you opposed to that, or were you opposed to some process that caused you to not respond, or all the Republicans, most of the Republicans, not to respond to the request by Senate and House leaders to call you back into special session?
Yeah, we did our own survey, and the survey in the House and the Senate was we didn't want to come back for what they wanted to. We adjourned sine die at the end of the session, which means we come back for special sessions. Special sessions are 1 to 3 days in length. We didn't want to come back for 2 to 3 weeks. and run over bills. The easy fruit, the low-hanging fruit had already been picked off the tree. This was not going to be a 3-day session. This was going to last 2 to 3 weeks, in my estimation, at a minimum. And how are you going to get the House back with 151 members? Even if you put them in the Civic Center, they're still not allowed to have more than 50 people in one location. So that was an impossibility. The other thing that I thoroughly objected to was if the limit is 50 and is for protection from spread of COVID, how are you going to put about 200 legislators plus all the staff for 2 to 3 weeks and then evenly distribute us back out all across the state of Maine? There was no magic window to go back into session, and that has been made clear by the wedding up to Millinocket. And I think there's another location in the nursing home. Maybe it's in New Hampshire, but it shows that there was no magic window to go back. The governor has the ability to call us back into session anytime she wants to. And when she calls us back, if she does, there's always an agenda. She tells us what they're calling us back for. Republicans were more than happy to go back for any emergency items that were COVID-19 related, including any budget items or anything. And so in my personal belief is I'm waiting for the governor to decide if that type of an emergency actually exists. Everything that was left on the table can be taken up by the new legislature.
Okay, well, thank you. That pretty much wraps up our session. And we very much appreciate your coming on to the show and answering questions for us, and wish you well in your election. And thank you again, Senator Dana Dow of Lincoln County, for joining us on Maine Challenge.
You're more than welcome, and I wish you good health and wellness also.
Thank you, Senator Dow. Appreciate it.
All right.
See you down the road.
All right, good.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.